So you're from Atlanta, and you went to school here in Boston. How did you end up at BU, and what made you switch from journalism to the film industry?
Oh my gosh, two long answers. I'll sort of hit one at a time.
Okay.
Really, I always wanted to come to school in Boston. I was a big history buff, honestly. And for some reason, I never visited Boston. I ended up visiting my senior year my senior year in high school, I think, or college maybe. No, yeah, during college. But my parents honestly couldn't afford to send me away, they said. So I went to University of Georgia undergrad, but I kept thinking that it would be nice to go to Boston. I studied journalism as an undergrad, and I realized that Boston had a master's program because I really wasn't sure what I wanted to do. But I thought, well, at that time it was a 9-month master's program. And I thought, well, maybe I could work it out to get a little financial aid and figure out how to get myself there. And I had a girlfriend who's with me today, actually, who came up here as an undergrad. And I came up here, like I said, when I was in college to visit her. And that's the first time I'd ever been to the city. And I just kind of fell in love with it. And I could see myself here. So, and I felt like honestly I needed a little bit more training or something, or just something to get me to figure out what it was I wanted to do and what kind of job I wanted to get. So it was a combination of wanting to be here and wanting to be in the city and always wanting to come to BU. And I feel like they had the right thing for me that was just enough amount of time to let me kind of help me figure it out just a little bit more.
Now, when you came here, you were a journalism student. You had no idea what you wanted to do at the time. Like, what made you want to start as a journalism student?
It's interesting. Well, I kind of grew up as a child of the Watergate era, and that was like the cool profession to do, especially if you were interested in history and politics and current events and that kind of thing. So I thought I wanted to be a journalist. But I think the other thing that Boston, and this is kind of an interesting thing, I studied it in college, but I also kind of took a lot of subjects in a lot of different areas, kind of trying to, again, figure out how I was going to apply all of that. And then I came here to get a master's degree. But I think, if anything, it kind of started to open up some doors but eliminate others. I really didn't want to be, a newspaper reporter. Right. I kind of figured that out really by coming here. I said I kind of eliminated one thing, but again, it kind of opened a door to what a producer does. And I thought, well, how can I, what kind of combination of things could I get to do that? And at one point I thought I wanted to go into broadcast news. But I came back to Atlanta, which was my hometown, and I ended up getting a job at the Georgia Public Television Network in Atlanta, and working, it was a paid internship actually, for a guy who was working on 2 films for the first season of a new show for PBS called American Playhouse. And it was kind of like, he was going to produce like 2 equivalent of movies of the week, 2 sort of small films. And he needed I call it a Girl Friday. I mean, I did a little bit of everything, but it kind of opened my eyes to the world of independent filmmaking. And I went on the movie set, and for the first time ever, and the day I went on there, I just big light bulb goes off, ding. I saw the dynamic of what went on the movie set, and the actors and all the people that did all the work and the production office, and I said, this is what I want to do.
It's so interesting because even though you didn't want to do journalism, that's kind of what led you into that role, which then led you into going into film.
Well, that's what I'm saying. You never know where these little opportunities may take you and what your background, it's always good to know how to write a paragraph or, do something, be to communicate with people, or definitely all these skills that I feel like I got from my undergraduate degree and my graduate degree at BU, between, writing skills, communication skills, those kind of things have, served me well throughout my whole career.
Absolutely. So you said you did an internship, and that's when you had exposure to a film set. Right. What was your first big film gig after you graduated from comm, and how did you end up getting that particular job?
Well, the first one was this actually, if you count working on a film, this was the film was called King of America, and it was a short, it was an independent type film, but it had the outlet was PBS for this, it was called American Playhouse. So that was the first, production I ever worked on, really, or live action production. And then I made some contacts with the Georgia Film Office. At that time, Georgia was small and relatively unknown in terms of Hollywood, so to speak, or not really. I guess Hollywood was aware of it. And there was a lot of film work going on there. So that's where I was living, and I connected with the film office. And there wasn't, things going on in every state like there are now. Right. But it was just one of those happenstance kind of things. And I said, I'm interested in that. I'm interested in working, doing this kind of work. And so I proceeded to, but you have to be willing to do a little bit of everything. So I worked on commercials, and I worked on industrials, and I worked on TV things that would come on location there, and occasionally movies would come. And so I tried to, get myself in on, actually movies, whether they were really small, independent, low budget, what they call low budget movies. They're making someone's credit card, to, Hollywood type films. The first Hollywood film I worked on was a film called The Slugger's Wife. It was made by Columbia Pictures. And another interesting happenstance thing occurred is that the Coca-Cola Company, which was based in Atlanta, the international headquarters of Coca-Cola, bought Columbia Pictures. Wow. So for a while they owned Columbia Pictures, and Columbia Pictures decided to spend some time and money in Atlanta where Coca-Cola was based because of that relationship. So there was actually a major film production that came there. Neil Simon was the writer. Hal Ashby was the director. It was a major movie for Columbia Pictures, and I worked in the production office. So I got to meet a lot of people that worked in Hollywood, and that started again whet my appetite for bigger and better, working on bigger productions, more Hollywood type productions, in the hopes that one day, I would go to Hollywood and work in Hollywood. So I knew a lot about movies. So people would call me when they came to Atlanta to work, to do movies, and then I had an opportunity to work in New York. So I went to work in New York for a little bit, and then I worked in some different places in the South. And again, gradually it started to spread in terms of me being able to work on different productions and get different type of movie production experience. And all the while I was watching what the producer did. Right. And I kept thinking, I think I can do that, or I'd like to do that, or maybe someone give me a chance to do that. And kind of made them, made the different producers my unofficial mentors. I would just kind of watch and observe what they did. And it helped me ultimately to kind of create my own style when I became a producer. You take a little bit of what that person does and a little bit of what that person does, and you try to figure out how am I gonna do that. So it was a great training ground for me to work on these different things in Atlanta.
That's very cool. I heard that you are not a huge fan of the word no. Can you tell me about that?
Well, I think, so much of it was based on the fact that I was based in Atlanta for a while. And like I had said earlier today, I think, there weren't that many opportunities. So you really, if you started saying no, you were going to know yourself out of a job. So when you're trying to support yourself and you're trying to make way with your career, I think it's super important to say yes to even the smallest things. Unless, obviously there are circumstances where you would, if it seems not safe or something feels really unusual about it. But I think for the general, in most general terms, I think you never know where that next opportunity is going to come from. And you never know if maybe you don't like what you're doing, but you might see, oh, I like what that person over there at that desk is doing. And I think it helps you when you're sort of trying to figure out, it's okay to eliminate things and say, I did that, but that doesn't seem like what I want to do. But better than that, like I say, I like that, what that person's doing. Next time I'm going to try doing that job, or I'm going to go after those kinds of jobs. Right. So I feel like the more you say that, the more you're exposed to what, just what the working world is like. When I talk to students, and I have relationships at BU and some of the schools that are based in Los Angeles, I try to tell students, just go out and try to go to work. Go to work, because that's when you start seeing, what you feel like you're good at, what you like, what you don't like. You really don't know that until you start immersing yourself into that, to sort of the professional world.
What is the smallest job that you said yes to, would you say? I'm sure this is going way back.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I'm saying the smallest. Do you mean in responsibility?
In responsibility, or something that you wouldn't have taken had you been in a market where the opportunity was more vast.
Yeah.
I heard you drove a van.
I did. Well, I guess that, it was interesting. There was more to that story. A friend of mine who was actually going to do the job, I forgot exactly what happened, but he was like one of the major location scouts in Georgia at that time, and he was a good friend of mine. And I really hadn't moved up to doing that kind of work yet. But he said, oh, something came up, and do me a favor, this weekend or, the next few days I need to take this group on a location scout. And I said, first of all, I always say, oh, I can do that. And he said, well, it's 8 or 10 guys, and it's a big van, and you're going in the North Georgia mountains. And I mean, it slowly became more complicated after I said, oh, no problem. But then I found out it was a very prestigious group of filmmakers, and I thought, okay, I'm gonna give it a whirl. And literally was the only girl in the group. And it was kind of stressful. I mean, it was stressful driving. I mean, I feel like I'm a good driver. I was relatively young. I was in my 20s, but I was a good driver. But it was literally driving. But the things had been set out, so it wasn't, But I feel like I don't think I really want to be a driver. But but I think the opportunity to spend the time with these filmmakers and really just be a little bit of a fly on the wall and those kind of things, led to, them offering me ultimately a job on a part of the show that was filmed in Georgia. And, that felt a little out of my, that wouldn't have been a job I would have described to you as something I probably would have done at the time. But it paid off in a great way. I really learned a lot. And you had to kind of be one of the boys. Right. If you wanted to work in the film business, you had to be okay with being one of the boys, because there was not a lot of women, and a lot of times you were the only girl in the group, and you had to laugh at the jokes and have a beer with them and kind of be okay with not anything untoward or anything like that, but you just had to kind of be able to kind of go with the boys and kind of hang with them and be have a good time. And I learned a good lesson from that.
Well, that was going to be my next question. In such a male-dominated industry, still to this day to a certain extent, how did you make your way to the top the way you did? I mean, you're pretty much like overlooking Hollywood from your seat right now. How did you make your way to the top?
Well, I really have to give, it's interesting, when I was working on my speech for today's commencement, I was spent some time with one of my dear colleagues that works with me at DreamWorks, and she's a BU graduate. She's a little bit younger than me, and we were talking, and she was looking through an early draft that I had, and she said, Bonnie, don't forget to add something in there about how hard you work. And she said, you have to remind people that it looks like, you don't want to make it appear like somebody came along with a fairy wand and just tapped you on the head and you got all these jobs. That's not the way it is. And I have to just go back to what you were asking me. I mean, I worked hard. I worked like a dog many times, and, long locations, long days on locations, distant locations, months in Jamaica, months in South Dakota, places that you wouldn't think, you would feel like spending, months and days in the middle of South Dakota, in the middle of the plains or whatever on different movies. But, and I made sacrifices for that. I mean, in my personal life and different things that I might have done differently or whatever. But I was very ambitious for that. I wanted to be a movie producer in the movie business in Hollywood. That's what I realized. I wanted to do that, and I doggedly pursued it. But like I say, I worked hard. I think when you work hard, and it doesn't always happen. Some of it is luck, but I like to think sometimes I was part of the luck. And I was there, and people recognize you, and they offer you some. And if that turns out good, they offer you an opportunity, and you take that opportunity, and that may lead to the next thing. But that's not to say there's not a lot of hard work and in between all of that. And you sacrifice your personal life, and you sacrifice sometimes making as much money as you would like or think you deserve. And there are all kind of things that go along with that took me to that place. I feel, like I say, I feel very fortunate. I feel very lucky, but I feel like I was part of the hard work and being there at the right place at the right time, and putting yourself forward. And people ask me what I wanted to do. I never hesitate to say I want to be a producer. And at some point, somebody gave me that opportunity.
I just got goosebumps. So Hollywood Reporter named you the most powerful woman in Hollywood.
One of them. I'm on the list.
Okay.
I wish I would love to take credit for being the most, but I don't think that's the case. But so I have to qualify that.
Okay.
But I was on a list of women.
One of the most powerful women in Hollywood.
Okay.
what does that title mean to you, and how did you feel when you found out that you made the list?
Well, it's very flattering. It's about people that have high positions, that are in a position to hire other people and make decisions about movies and that type of thing. And I think it's an amazing thing. But I think a part of that too is also they're also looking for women that give back. And I love to be included because I'm in a position that, yes, I can make important decisions and I have got a great title, but I also feel an important piece of that is also the giving back and spending time with, I hope I can set examples for other, young women and men young men as well coming along. I mean, I take a lot of joy in doing that. I'm a part of a couple of mentorship programs with some organizations I belong to. In particular with Hollywood Reporter, they have a program with Big Brothers and Sisters of Los Angeles, and I have a mentee who is was a junior in high school, and she, nobody in her family had ever gone to college, and so you spend a lot of, they match you up with the right person, and I spent a lot of time with her and helped her through her junior year in high school and her senior year in high school, and now I'm very proud to say that she just finished her freshman year in college. In Los Angeles, at a college in Los Angeles, and so she's doing great. And so those are the kind of things that really make me feel like empowered and make me feel good that I can help other people to sort of start to find their dreams. So I think that list is erroneous in that it's not just about having an important position, but it's also about women that also part of that. Getting that honor is noticing women or recognizing women that are giving back to different, all these different things, and those are the things that mean a lot to me.
Okay, so as who you are, what advice would you give to students at COM, specifically even females, or those that identify with being female? What advice would you give them, if they want to make an impact on the entertainment industry?
I think, as I was saying earlier, I think the most important thing is just go out and go to work. Just try to get, and again, obviously the qualifier is try to get something that's related to something that you think you want to do. Right. And start there. I mean, that's really the step, is just start working. And then you'll see, there's a lot of perceived glamour with, movies in the film business or movies in TV or movies in entertainment. But it's a lot of hard work, and I think you have to see, is that what I like? Is that what I want to do? Is that going to give me satisfaction? Is that going to help me be independent and earn an income? There's so many little things, but you have to start somewhere. So no matter, who you are, just, try to start the process, just get it going. And I think there's so many more opportunities for women these days. I'm happy for that. There's so many more women coming out of these programs. Young women, and I think there are places for you there, and it's you have different challenges than guys do. There's definitely more on women that, especially women that want to have, want to balance it and have families as well. But it can be done. It's not going to be maybe 100% like you see in your in your mind when you start out. But I think there's a version of that can make that's for everyone, for each individual.
Okay, so you were you were in film production, but not always animation.
Right.
How did you kind of make your way into animation?
Again, it was one of those things. The animated films came up as sort of by happenstance. A friend of a friend of a friend, or a woman that I had worked with, wanted to introduce me to somebody over at Disney. And when I went up to work in live action, and when I went to meet over at, and I always was open to say, go meet everybody, go take every interview. And I went over and met at Disney to talk about some live action films. And in the process of meeting a couple of people over there, one of the women, it was another woman over there, mentioned something about animation. And this was right after, kind of after Beauty and the Beast had come out, and animation was kind of experiencing a resurgence in popularity. And I didn't, as much as I liked animated movies when I was a kid, I really didn't, I wasn't, it wasn't my passion or anything, but I thought, oh, it could be interesting, I'll go have a meeting. And I think that was really, again, it was just one of those things where I said, go have a meeting, and you never know where that's going to lead. And I ended up having a meeting with the head of DreamWorks Animation at the time, Peter Schneider, and he started talking to me about the things that they were doing, and they just really sounded interesting to me. And they were looking for producers. And I was at that point in my career where I had a couple of good associate producer credits, but I wanted to be a full producer responsible for the whole thing, and I thought I was ready for an opportunity like that. So I started putting it out there. And it just so happened that it you know, not very first, but over the few months, we were talking back and forth, and it eventually came back as an opportunity to be a producer on a really small, kind of off-the-grid movie that they were doing. It just so happened that that movie was Toy Story. And we didn't know at the time that that was what it was going to turn out, but it was a very low budget, and it was going to be done with this little company in San Francisco that nobody had ever heard of. And so I said, oh, I'll try that. I mean, what, you know, but it was an opportunity for me to get a producer credit. So it was a combination of, okay, I think I can do it. I like animation, it's not whatever, but it was really more of an interesting career move for me. I said, I'll try it. So it kind of, you know, came together, and I really liked it. I really felt like it was something that I was able to have a creative voice in, and it was, you know, the rest is kind of history.
It's so great hearing your story, because there's not one part of your story that I've heard so far that sounds like it's unattainable for anyone. Do you know what I mean? It's just a matter of taking the opportunities that are presented to you, and then they'll lead to something. It's not like, you know, you knew one particular person that's high in power. It's just you moved your way up.
Yeah, and different people helped me at different times in my career.
Right.
You know, definitely I met some people that had some, you know, some power or some, you know, some influence and whatever, and they helped me at that moment, and then it moved on to somebody else who helped me, and somebody else who, somebody's always helping you, but I think you had to sort of chart the path. Okay, is this, and I definitely have to say I made some choices. You know, I had to think, is this the right, you know, I had to pay my rent, but I also had to say, is this, you know, where's this next job going to lead me?
Right.
You know, and sometimes it was a, you know, and should I make commitment to this job for this amount of time if it's not really leading me a little bit closer to my goal, which at that time was to become a movie producer.
Yeah, keep your eye on the prize.
Right. You know, is that going to move me toward that? Or should I take one job I had to decide to take a little bit of a pay cut?
Yeah.
And I, you know, thought, okay, I can still pay my rent. I probably won't be able to save any money. It's going to be a little bit tight, but I'm going to take it. And that, you know, taking that movie led me to meet Kevin Costner. Yeah. And, you know, the next movie, he offered me a chance to do, you know, a movie with him. And then I got paid more than I thought I was going to get paid. So, I mean, you just don't, you have to kind of, you know, sometimes it's just taking a little bit of a gamble. But again, like I talked about today, is I think you have to weigh what those risks are. At that point in my life, okay, what's the worst that could happen? Maybe I don't have the rent, but, you know, I try not to go that far. I tried to make sure as long as I can pay my expenses, you know, then I can take a little bit of pay cut. But then that may, you know, that led to then, you know, being a little bit more comfortable and getting the next job, I actually got a little bit of a promotion in terms of my title.
Right, got it. How has your degree from COM prepared you for your career? I mean, I know you have it was a degree in journalism.
Journalism degree.
Has it prepared you, you know?
Well, I think when I look back at now, I can really look back with perspective at my college career, both my undergraduate career, my career at, you know, my college career at BU, even though it was pretty short, about a year or so. But I think it was, you know, it was a combination of, you know, the teachers, the classes, the variety of things, and that was a little bit, I didn't know myself at that time. You just picked your own things, you know, you just picked what you wanted to take, as long as it was, you know, you did your requirements and stuff, but also just the experience. I mean, for me, and, you know, being an undergrad at University of Georgia, even in the beginning, I moved an hour away from my hometown, which at that time, that was a big deal when you're 17, you know, and then I moved even farther. I moved to Boston, which was a 2-hour flight from my home, and you know, just learning, you know, figuring out how to learn a new city and meet new people. And I think it was a combination of the, you know, the personal growth experience along with the education that I think has really served me well. I can't, you know, emphasize enough how I think, you know, having any kind of college experience is you know, is helpful in terms of your maturity and your growth.
Right, absolutely. And my last question, you mentioned faculty and professors. Is there one faculty member or professor that you recall from your time at BU that had the most impact, or you kind of, you know, whenever you think back to BU, that's who you think about?
Well, I didn't get to see him today because I think he's still working. His name is John Klarsfeld, and he's still a professor here. And he may not remember me, but he was my advisor professor when I was here for that year in grad school. And I really liked him a lot. And we were, you know, I remember him being fun to be with and smart, and so he's the one. I've had a couple of other ones, but he's the one I remember and remember the most. And Carol Rivers too. Carol Rivers was here, so it's amazing that they're here after all this time.
Well, I want to thank you so much again for your time. It was such a pleasure.
I hope it was helpful. I hope
absolutely.
I hope it was useful for something.
Hopefully, I mean, you're such an inspiration. I want to be the president of something.
Oh my gosh! I don't know. Be careful what you wish for. Like, right?